GSP offers high-quality parts with OEM fitment. Today, we're going to show you how to replace the CV joint. First, get the car up in the air, either on a lift or on jack stands. Safety first. Before you get started, you'll need to make sure you've got some specialty tools like snap ring pliers, torque wrench, and a pry bar. With your tools assembled, remove the wheel. After you've got the wheel off, remove the axle nut. With the axle nut off, give the axle a push to make sure there's some play and the axle is free. Then remove the bolts on the lower ball joint and pry the lower control arm down and separate the ball joint. With the lower control arm out of the way, turn the wheel and pull the axle out of the hub, rotor, spindle. The next step is to pop the axle out of the transmission. Once you've got the axle out, you'll need to cut the clamps off and remove the CV boot. With the boot removed, remove the CV joint and clean up all the old grease off of the spline shaft. Once you've got the shaft cleaned up, you'll need to remove a snap ring, and for that, you'll need snap ring pliers. With the snap ring removed, the CV joint will separate from the axle. Take one of the new clamps that came in your kit, slide it over the new boot, and then slide it onto the axle. With the boot end clamp on, put the snap ring back on the end of the axle tube. It's time to get lubricated. Take the packet of new grease that came in your kit and put it in the cup. Install the grease-filled cup back on the axle and put the other end of the boot over the cup with a new clamp. Now that the new boot is on, we've got to get it back on the car. Insert the axle into the transmission, being careful not to damage the seal. Once the axle is seated into the transmission, you can slide the other end of the axle shaft into the spindle. With the axle shaft through the spindle, pry down the lower control arm, line up the ball joint, and reinstall the hardware. Now you can put the axle nut back on. Reinstall the wheel. Lower the car to the ground. Just remember, it's important to torque these to the proper specs. If they're not torqued properly, you run the risk of wearing out the wheel bearing prematurely. And you've just installed a new CV joint in your car. GSP. Quality, efficiency, and reliability.